What makes a good journalist, in your opinion?
Well, that's a very subjective question. That's a really good question as well. I think somebody who tries very hard with, nobody's perfect, to be accurate, to be informative, and to be free of bias, and to be really curious. I think you need to have sort of an innate sense of curiosity about why people do the things that they do, about what could happen in the future, about how we organize ourselves as a society. Like, you got to be the person that read the paper all the time because you wanted to know what was going on in the world. And you have to feel like it's important that people do know what's going on in the world. I get it that it's heavy. And sometimes people are like, I can't watch the news. But really, we only can improve the world if we understand the problems that are present today, or the issues that have happened in history. Not to dismiss what's happened, but to learn from it and get better to avoid those problems again. So I think you have to be really curious about that. You have to have a really big appetite for what's going on in the world. And like I said, you have to be intent and laser-like focused on being, if you're a political journalist in particular, free of bias and accurate.
Who were some of your inspirations or role models or people you looked up to?
That's a good question too. I think, I've always consumed a lot of media south of the border, and I really I always looked up to my aunt. Her name is Thalia Ashuris. She's my dad's first cousin, actually. She was a reporter in Canada and a host for a long time, and then moved over to the States and worked for a couple big networks. She's gone to like a million war zones, and she certainly seemed to love what she did. And she was one of those people she is still alive. Obviously, just doesn't work in the field, but she's very committed to accuracy and to sort of like what I would characterize as like the old school principles of journalism. I think in a Canadian context, I don't know if I really ever looked up and thought, oh, that's what I want to do. But I did consume a lot of it, all of the big nightly newscasts, for example, and a lot of the morning shows. And I think as I actually entered the business, I've been beyond fortunate to have had some of the most amazing mentors, people that who I looked up to. For example, Tom Clark, who has, honest to goodness, I would not be where I am without not only his guidance, but like his encouragement. He always made me feel, from the day that I was in Edmonton and like begged my boss to put me in a room with him, that the sky was the limit for my potential. And sometimes when somebody else believes in you, when you're at a stage in your life where you don't really have the capacity to believe that's possible for yourself, it's like all you need. And he was really that person for me. And he's now moved on. He's like the consul general in New York City, but he's a wonderful journalist that always, like, I could call and be like, how do I go about this? What do I do? And, and then also just like the encouragement that he provided me, even in really rough times. And so he's certainly someone I looked up to. Donna Friesen over at Global was amazing to me as well. I've had so many countless mentors in this business. I've been so lucky. You hear horror stories in every industry, right? I've really had bosses along the way. Bob Russo at CBC, like people who took a vested interest in my success, and without whom I can guarantee, like, I would never have, attained what I have or be able to have these kinds of opportunities without.
You mentioned the old school rules of journalism. Would you just mind elaborating a little bit on what that is?
I mean, like getting the story right. I mean, like telling it without bias. Sort of the way that we used to expect it to be straight down the middle. And I don't mean that, I don't equate that with both sidesing everything and equal, giving equal weight to everybody. I mean, just this sort of like the kind of journalism that leaves you with the impression the person reporting does not come at it with an agenda. And I'm not accusing people of doing that right now, but I think that certainly there is an overall impression to that effect. And I feel like it was less so there before social media, before everybody could see our thoughts on everything, our retweets, things like that. And I love that kind of journalism. I think it serves a real purpose. And I feel like my aunt really exemplified it.